Hello there. I hope everyone's doing well this afternoon. I am Krista Sampson, and we're just going to give everybody a minute or so to get in here. And I'm here with the author, Victor Sampson, and I'll just let him start in about 30 seconds here.
Quick introductions here. So you've already met Krista. She's going to be moderating today, and I'm going to be running through the webinar as your presenter, and I'm Vic Sampson. Let's go ahead and get started with the webinar. Today we're talking about our brand new third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade books. What I wanted to kind of do a little bit today is kind of give you a big overview of what makes these different. Right. So for some of you that may be familiar with ADI, we had a third grade, a fourth grade, and a fifth grade book that came out almost 8-9 years ago now. But we're really excited now to release these 6, where we've got a third, fourth, and fifth grade that is tailored to the NGSS, and then third, fourth, and fifth grade specifically aligned with the standards that are used in Texas. So let's go over some things that make these all different. All right. So the first one, I think that when you look at the brand new books, is that we're using our updated ADI instructional models. So as we work in schools, as we conduct more research, as we are always constantly refining our instructional model to make sure it's the best thing possible. So when the old books, you can kind of think of those that are using the ADI instructional model version 2. And that was kind of released in 2012 and was used up all through those earlier books up to 2020. And it kind of looked like this. This is a graphic from one of those original books. It kind of had this more of an 8-stage approach. In 2022, we updated the instructional model in a lot of ways to be more consistent with what we're learning about how people learn and what we've experienced in the classroom. So from about 2020 on, we're using version 3 of the argument-driven inquiry model, and that's what's in the new books. So it's kind of been more of a streamlined in steps of instruction. Instead of 8 stages, we have 7. So this graphic here kind of gives you an idea of you can kind of think of each stage as a bin of different activities, and the little dots within each of those kind of bins there are the number of activities that kids engage in during that stage. For example, during the task stage, they have kind of 3 main activities they do. In the plan stage, another 3. Do stage only has 2, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a nice representation of how things work in this new model. Because we have that brand new model, all our new books, all 6 of them for 3rd through 5th grade, have brand new investigations. So here for NGSS and Texas, I put the table of contents in here. We've tried to organize them by physical science, life science, and earth science. So we've got 8 different investigations for 3rd grade, 1 specifically written for NGS, 1 specifically written for Texas. Same thing with 4th grade, another 8 investigations, and then as well for 5th grade. What's kind of cool about this is that since they're different investigation, you've actually got a couple different wells to pull from. So say if you're in an NGSS state, you can pick up the NGSS book, but you can also grab the Texas book as well if you're looking for a few more different investigations to use in your grade band or in different classes. The third big feature is then our older books. Not all the investigations, especially the older ones, were 3-dimensional. In our new books, they are completely 3D. Just to kind of give you an overview of how we think about that, so we're all on the same page. You can think of 3-dimensional instruction or 3-dimensional learning as really focusing on these 3 aspects of science. So the science and engineering practices are the things that scientists do to figure out how the world works. Disciplinary ideas, you can kind of think of these as the starting place that people use to explain different things around them. And then cross-cutting concepts are a lens that you can use to decide what kind of information you need to collect by engaging in the practices to make sense of that. So if you think about a one-dimensional approach to instruction or learning, you're only focusing on one of these things. So for example, if your disciplinary core ideas, you're only learning about concepts that are important in a single discipline, say biology. If you're only focusing on cross-cutting concepts, you're only focusing on a concept that goes across several different disciplines, something like structure and function. And then science and engineering practices, you're kind of engaging in the different process skills in isolation without really focusing on core ideas or concepts. If you start blending those two, then you've got the overlap and that becomes 2D. Probably the most common kind of 2D instruction is where kids are learning about disciplinary core ideas by engaging in a practice. That's kind of the typical inquiry approach that was a focus in science classrooms for so long. And then if you bring in the cross-cutting concepts, then you give students a chance to use ideas, a framework, and multiple practices to figure things out. And that's when it gets three-dimensional. So that's how the NGSS defines it. Since we're in tech, since here we are in Texas, we often do things a little bit different, at least. So we are still having our standards that we've just adopted be three-dimensional, but we call the cross-cutting concepts recurring themes and concepts, and then the disciplinary core ideas are more just disciplinary content. So it's the same kind of focus, but just kind of different vocabulary that's being used across different contexts. The fourth big thing about the new books is that if you look at the NGSS 1, each one investigation targets a specific performance expectation that is found in 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade, and it's 100% aligned with the DCIC cross-cutting concepts and science and engineering practices that are found that make up that performance expectation. On the flip side, if you're thinking about the Texas investigations, each of those are three-dimensional as well. As I mentioned, and targets specifically a disciplinary content TEK, a recurring theme concept TEK, and multiple SCPs TEKs. So let me show you a little bit what that might look like. So if you think about NGSS, so here's a 5th grade performance expectation where it's talking about measuring and graphing quantities to provide evidence that regardless of the type of change that occurs when heating, cooling, or mixing substances, the total weight of matter is conserved. So if you look below that performance expectation, there are the three aspects of science. There's the practices, the core ideas, and cross-cutting concepts. So we use all of those to create an investigation called states of matter and weight. So in that investigation, they're engaging in not only the target science and engineering practice, which is using mathematics and computational thinking, but they're also engaging in all of the other SCPs that are found in the NGSS as well, like asking questions, developing models, constructing explanations, and engaging in an argument for evidence. So you actually kind of go beyond what you're doing there. Then when it comes to the cross-cutting concepts, students are actually introduced to that idea specifically, quantity and measurement scales, as a way that they can use that idea to help figure out the guiding question of the investigation, and as well as the core ideas, states of matter, and properties of matter. So you can start seeing how kind of students are pulling all aspects of these in. Similar, if you think about Texas, the way the TEKs are written, they're still put into different sections. So you have science and engineering practice sections, you have the recurring themes and concept sections, and then the disciplinary content, which is multiple sections. So what we did to create our investigations that go into the Texas books is we looked at all of the scientific and engineering practices that are aligned with doing ADI, and you can kind of see some of them up there. So you've got TEKs 1, 2, and 3, all having to do with science and engineering practices. They'll engage in all of those during those that investigation. Then we also looked specifically at recurring themes and concepts, picked one of those that would make the most sense in the context of this investigation, and then disciplinary content. So when you're talking about the disciplinary content, it happens to be forces and talking about unequal forces. So we introduced that idea of how do you describe a force that are pulling in different directions or pushing in different directions with different strengths. Then we also add information about patterns and how you can use patterns as a tool to make sense of what you're observing. So we are explicitly introducing these ideas as tools that students can use to make sense and answer the guiding question of the investigation. The other big thing that we have tried to really make our new book stand out is to really give students a reason to develop their literacy skills. So when you think of, I'm just going to use the Common Core as an example of this here. When you think about literacy skills, you're really thinking about reading, writing, speaking, and listening in a content area, right? So science provides a great context for doing that. So for example, here are two standards that are addressed or that are a focus of reading informational text. And what's interesting, I would think about this is that how important it places emphasis on kids figuring out what the main ideas of a text and then explaining how that's supported by details. So to really focus on that standard, we don't give kids analysis questions to answer. What we do is have them engage in the text through multiple strategies, and then they have to decide what's the most useful idea or what will help them from that text solve something bigger. Same thing when you're talking about speaking. It's speaking and listening. It's all about comprehension and collaboration. So coming to discussions prepared, following agreed upon rules for discussion, pose and respond to specific questions by making comments. All of these key literacy skills are all built into these investigations. So giving students opportunities to develop arguments, share those verbally, provide critique, reasons, and then using that information to revise what you presented earlier. Allows you to address all of these different speaking and listening standards at the same time. And then when you think about writing and how important writing is, an amazing context to teach writing skills is science. So this idea of introducing topics, developing topical facts, linking ideas, using precise language, providing concluding statements, we build that into this approach. So we're giving them something to write about after they figure things out and then learning to be able to share their ideas. So we build all of these supports in for them to do that as well. Sixth big thing is we really wanted to make our new books a great way to make a language-rich learning environment that supports new language acquisition. One of the things that has come out of research in recent years is the importance of interactions for students who are learning new languages, whether it's Spanish or English or any number of different ones, is allowing students to have more interactions with each other in a language-rich learning environment. So there's a reason to pick up the use of language. And to kind of capture that, if you're in Texas, we often use the ELPS to frame the kinds of activities that students need to have chances to be able to do when they're developing new language skills. WIDA uses a different set here, but they're all aligned to these activities. So if you engage students in these investigations and allow them to interact with each other through the reading, writing, and speaking, listening that they're doing for those literacy skills, they're also going to be developing new language as well. And you can kind of see here on the left is the WIDA ones of the importance of defining investigatable questions or identifying relevant evidence or introducing topics. Right. So these are all things that they just automatically do. So it creates an environment for that. Same thing with the ELPS, speak using content area vocabulary, speak using appropriate registers, convey messages, those kinds of things that students need so many opportunities to do so they can develop their language skills. The other thing we've thought a lot about is given the amount of time that students have or teachers have to teach science in elementary school, if everything else is going on, can sometimes be a challenge, right? So often we're hearing teachers get about 20 to 30 minutes a day maximum, or sometimes that's only a few times a week. So what we try to do with our new investigations and our new books is to make sure that they're designed so they can be split into these 20 to 30 minute time blocks that you can easily pick up on the next piece on the next day that you start on with that. So let me show you kind of how that looks like here. So if you're thinking about the instructional model version 3 of ADI, so to speak, you've got your task stage and you've got these 3 activities in there. And you can complete those 3 activities in 20 minutes. We designed them that way. So you could do that on your first day of science for 20 minutes and then end at the task. The next day you can pick up at the ideas stage. That takes about 20 minutes to do the 3 activities, the reading of the 3 pieces of text. That takes about 20 minutes. Third day takes about 20 minutes to plan out an investigation. Fourth day, so on and so forth. So as you move through these, it makes it really easy to break these up without having to reteach a bunch of things. So you can kind of just pick right back up at these natural progressions. Another big thing is we really wanted to make the investigations super easy for teachers to use. Some of our older books were really dense in terms of teacher notes, hard to kind of follow. as we were learning how to best share ideas. But now we've really made these books so they're super easy for teachers to kind of grab and use really quickly. So here's an example of a lesson plan that you'll see in the new books. There's always an overview of the guiding questions, what students are figuring out, that breakdown of what's going on by stages in those activities, how long that is, all your standards alignments. So in this case, science ones, language arts, and language development standards. Then we include information about important things, but know about the practices and core ideas, core ideas and cross-cutting concepts. So kind of get a quick refresher. There's a whole discussion of the materials you need and how to set up the equipment with pictures. And then each state has a detailed lesson plan that tells you what are the learning objectives for exactly that, that stage, as well as what you're going to be doing within each of those activities, including grouping, how much time, what you're going to be giving students, what to show them, all sorts of teaching tips and ways to make the classroom more equitable and little tidbits for that. So we've really tried to make this a really helpful resource for teachers when they're picking up and starting this. The other thing that we've built in is that each book comes with what we're calling a book module. So you get a code that allows you to go into our Learning Hub. And for any book that you have purchased, you have free access to Learning Hub. And when you get in there and you log in, you'll see this. And this is from my account here. And you can see up in the right, there's my book view, and I've loaded 2 books. So if, for example, if you got the 5th grade for NGSS edition, you can click on that book and it'll take you to each investigation. And then each investigation, you can look at standards, the materials you need. The handouts buttons allows you to download all of the student handouts. So you can download those and then print them out and give them to students. And then what I think is really cool is the presentation mode. So if you click on that button while you're teaching, it brings up a kind of like a slide deck for you that has all of the images and pictures and videos built in. So you can guide students through an investigation without having to create anything new, right? So you just click on that. Here's the opening phenomenon video for that, and you're able to get started. So we're really excited about that feature. Another big thing that we've tried to do is make all of our investigations handouts on, right? We really think the kids, especially grades 3 through 5, need to be touching things and so they're getting a chance to do science together. But what we wanted to really do is make it easy to get the materials that you need. So we did that in a couple ways. So one, in the book, we put a list of everything that you need for any of that investigations, and we try to make it so you can source it yourself pretty easily. So there's consumables, equipment, and safety PPE gear that every student needs, and that's listed by group for the entire class and each of your groups. Now, if you don't want to source, we've also then for each investigation, you can go to our store and we've put together kits that come with all of these things that you can purchase, and they come as a class set. You can use that, just open a box and you're ready to go. Also in the books, we put a master list of everything you would need for all the investigation across all 8 of them. So you can look those things up, put them together yourself, or if it's just easier, you can go to our store, pick up a class kit bundle, and it'll come with all of that stuff for you, all bundled by investigation. So you just kind of open up the box, take out a box for your investigation, and you're ready to go. And then that's available at our store as well. And then finally, I think the most important thing before we stop for questions is we really wanted our books to be a tool that give district schools and teachers more choice and flexibility, right? So many of us have full curriculum that we are using, whether we purchased or developed it. Often in there, there might be stronger or weaker lessons. These investigations, since they're aligned to all of the standards for either NGSS or TEKS, you can easily just swap out to improve the outcomes of a certain concept, or if you're thinking about that students maybe have been traditionally struggling with something, you can swap out something and use one of these investigations. You can also use these investigation as the foundation of your of a curriculum that you're building. So these become your anchor points, and then teachers can, or then you can decide how to fill in kind of the everyday little activities between those. But then this becomes your kind of like the meat of your curriculum. So it really is designed to give you a lot of flexibility and choice so you can decide what's best for your context and your kids. So that's why we include all those information in the book so you can use that kind of stuff. So that's the big ones. We've got a few minutes left here. So once again, on the tools, the best way to ask a question is to go to the Q&A section, click on that button, and then type in your question.
Okay, I have one question right now from Layla. Is there an assessment component for each investigation? So could you kind of talk about the assessment that is part of the investigation?
Sure. So what we do, the way we think about assessment with ADI is assessment is just trying to find ways to make student thinking visible. So what we try to do is not have so much assessment as something that's separate from learning, but is actually just embedded into that. So as students are moving through each of these stages, they're producing products, right? So in the task stage, they're producing models of their original thinking. In the plan stage, they're creating an investigation plan, right? That they write out and share. They generate arguments, they write reports. So all of these pieces give you a great opportunity to see their thinking. And as they're moving through the investigation, you can use that as an educative and for formative purposes, where you can give students feedback to help them improve, or you can use it as to say, oh, my students are struggling with this. I'm gonna have to do a quick little mini lesson for 5 minutes here at the start of the next period to make sure they're on track. Then what we often think about is the very final report after it goes through a draft and review and turned in. You can use that as your summative assessment, and we include a rubric in there that allows you to go through and not only assess on if they understand the content, but how they're engaging in the practices. So it's a really kind of a holistic summative assessment that you can really see how kids are thinking and doing.
Awesome. Okay, a question from Andre. What if students are struggling with writing their argument or creating a model? Are there scaffolds?
Yeah, so often, like we're going to dig into these in the deeper dive even more. So what we've done too is, since these are all complex practices that take a while to learn, right? So like if you think of all of the different practices, from asking questions, engaging in an argument, to analyzing data, it takes lots and lots of practices. And the first time students do this, they're not going to be perfect because it's new, right? As you're new to anything. So what we've tried to build in is tons of scaffolds, right? So whether those are graphic organizers or extra tools that in the teacher notes that give advice about things that you could do to better support students, all those are in there. And then over time, what you can start doing is pulling back as we go through. So if you join us for the deep dive, I'll show you exactly what those look like next time with lots of cool graphics and pictures.
All right. I think that's it for questions. So I will let you finish up.
So speaking of deep dives, so what we're going to do is on Monday, April 15th, from 4 to 4:30, we're going to be doing the deep dive into third grade. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run you through an exact investigation and let you see how it all progresses through. So you can kind of see really what this looks like. Then right after that, we'll do from 4:30 to 5, we'll do fourth grade, and then fifth grade from 5 to 5:30. So it gives you an example to see what these all look like, talk you through them, the design, kind of what you would do as a teacher as you're moving through these, get a chance to see the videos and the different scaffolds that we put in. So please sign up, join us. It would be great to see you there.
All right. Thanks y'all for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon.